Hello everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So, as you can see by the title of this episode, this is going to be me having a little more expanded thoughts on the Russiagate thing and the fallout from it. Now that we've gotten a couple of good weekdays under our belt here, now that our esteemed journalism class has had a couple of actual work days to kind of do their narratives and get their thoughts out there, because, like I said in the last episode, this all broke on 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Friday night. So all of this kind of took place over the weekend, and now it is Tuesday. It is March 26th, and so we've had a couple days to marinate on this and to get some more elaborated responses, and there are some things that I do want to talk about as far as responses that have come down over the past couple days. And like I said, just a little more elaborated thoughts on this. And before we get too far into this, yes, I see the other breaking story right now. I see it. I have been seeing it all day on Twitter. Actually, not even all day. But that story is not even quite 12 hours old yet. So it's not time to comment on that one yet. And I'm very interested to see where that story is going to end. But that's not what we are here to talk about today. We will talk about Smollett next time. Next time we talk. But I want to go ahead and start with, like I said, now that we've got a couple of good weekdays under our belt with this, because always when things happen over a weekend, I mean, it's not like it used to be where the weekends are kind of sacrosanct, like we're on call 24/7 now, but weekends are a little more sleepier than weekdays. So what we are at now is a very kind of weird place as far as reactions to not the Mueller report. I don't want to say that because the Mueller report is still not available. And I do want to make that point. We are still going off of Barr's letter, and it is in the process, the Mueller report, of being vetted for public dissemination. I'm not quite sure. I interpreted Barr's letter as saying that he was going to make it public to everybody, but even if he just makes it public to Congress, I mean, obviously it's going to leak, so everybody's going to have it anyway. But where we are at right now is a lot of people are in denial, obviously. A lot of people who had their hopes really, really pinned on this being the thing that made the bad orange man go away. And as it stands right now, that's not what's going to happen. So what I've seen happen is people reacting to the Barr letter and not point blank saying that they think that he is lying or that he is misconstruing anything or anything like that, but kind of that, I don't believe you. And in fact, I saw Elizabeth Warren actually did go on record and say that she doesn't believe what Barr said in the letter. And of course, everybody is hashtag release the full Mueller report, which is coming, people. He made that very clear in the letter, and this is something that's starting to annoy the hell out of me every time I see somebody mention it. Barr has made it apparent that that is the plan, but as it stands right now, there are still open grand jury investigations in SDNY, there's open investigations in Virginia, there's open investigations in DC, and there's information apparently in the Mueller report that pertains to people or events that are currently under investigation in other districts. So before they release the Mueller report, you have to run it past these other investigations to make sure that you're not releasing information that is germane to those investigations that they aren't ready to have made public or don't want made public. So this isn't something that you really rush through. And the thing that's kind of getting me right now is I'd like to see a Venn diagram of the people who bitched about Barr releasing his letter too early and people who are all hashtag release the full Mueller report right now, because that's not intellectually consistent. Like, you either get A or B, and I am kind of looking at this point as Barr releasing this letter as something of a stopgap so that they have more time to do what they need to do as far as vetting the report and making sure that any information that needs to be redacted is redacted, like I said, for purposes of other investigations. If there's any national security issues, these things take time. And from what I understand right now, the DOJ is saying we're talking weeks and not months. So we are, in my mind, on something of an accelerated time frame here, but I don't think that what Barr is trying to do here and what the DOJ is trying to do here is like an insane ask. Like, you're trying to not step on anybody's toes. Cool. Everybody just back the fuck up and let them do that. And in the meantime, I guess everybody can keep speculating the same way they've been doing for the past 2 years. I don't know why everybody has a problem with it now. Anyway, so there has been this bit of skepticism towards the Barr letter because obviously it does not say the things that certain people were very, very invested in it saying, which is that there was collusion with Russia or that there was obstruction of justice. So, here we are. Here are some of the dumbass things that I've seen floated, and that is this new idea that certain people who are very, very angry about things either want to haul Mueller or Barr or both up in front of Congress for a congressional hearing to discuss what is in the Mueller report, which, again, nobody knows because you haven't seen it. So, I mean, I can't. And the amount of people that are not necessarily the far left wing nuts who are just sad and just crying and wailing and gnashing of teeth, but the amount of people who seem to want some kind of revenge for the past 2 years and want the people who pushed the whole Russiagate thing to somehow pay for what they did, which, okay, first of all, you want to counter a bullshit investigation with another bullshit investigation? Like, seriously? What is that supposed to accomplish? Aside from dragging this out even longer than it already needs to. As far as there being any kind of reckoning for elected officials, I don't know. That's what ballot boxes are for. As far as there being any kind of reckoning for the media, I'll get into that a little bit in a second. But again, I don't understand what you guys want. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems like there's this idea that somebody should pay for this. And it's like, well, what do you want? Like, what payment do you want them to make? What recompense can there possibly be for the past 2 years? Like, I don't get it. It just seems kind of dumb to me. But since we are on the topic of the media, and that is really where a lot of the ire is directed towards, rightfully, because it's not to say that there weren't elected officials that pushed the Russiagate narrative and people that bought into that are elected officials, but really the main driver was the media. And I will go ahead and link it in the show notes. I'll find it again. But Matt Taibbi's piece, where I referenced it in the last episode, where he was comparing this to the WMD scandal, which, again, a little too hyperbole for me, but that piece is a great piece because if you haven't followed this, or if 2 years has felt like 20 years to you, like it does to me, and you've kind of forgotten how bad the media screwed the pooch, and you forgot how many stories were just flat out wrong, and how many times that just the media fell flat on their face, and really, like, where it started. And I had actually forgotten this, where the whole Russiagate thing really, really kicked off. And that is when BuzzFeed actually released the whole Steele dossier. Now, to try to explain this, if you haven't followed this, the Steele dossier is also aka the P-tape dossier. And how this all went down is the dossier had been shopped around to plenty of other media outlets. Like, pretty much every media outlet had been shopped it. They passed on it because they could not verify the contents within the dossier, which, according to journalistic standards, is what you're supposed to be able to do before you run a story or you run a particular piece. You have to be able to verify that the contents within it are factual. So, every outlet passed on it. Now, there were a couple of outlets that made reference to it in other stories, but nobody was willing to touch it until BuzzFeed just decided that, well, we're just going to throw it up there and it is what it is, which at the time was considered just like the most insane thing ever. Like, that was something that you did not do. Like, you did not just do something like that. And so after BuzzFeed did that, everybody in the media just kind of spent the last 2 years like, fuck it, let's run with whatever we want to come up with, whatever thinly sourced story, whatever unnamed sources, whatever bullshit that somebody tells us that sounds good or sounds like a narrative that we like or is something of a scoop. We're just going to run with it and I guess screw verifying it. And if it's wrong, then we'll just do a retraction or a correction later, which the last 2 years has normalized that practice in a way that I don't think, if you know anything about journalism before this, that was not the norm at all. Like, there was still that idea that you had to, I mean, at least if you wanted to be first, like, okay, everybody wants to be first to press. Clicks lead everything right now. It's all about traffic. It's all about ad revenue. I get it. I totally get it. But what has happened is that has taken precedence over actually getting stories correct. It's no longer about being right. It's about being first. So there has been story after story after story after story that has been run, that has been proven to be false. Like, not even like kind of wrong, but just dead ass false, that have either had to be corrected or completely retracted. That's not normal. That's not how this is supposed to work. And so this whole Russiagate situation has degraded journalism in a way that has creeped over into other stories. Like, I think the best example I could probably give is the Kavanaugh debacle. And the idea that it was okay to just run with what the fuck ever story that sounded good to you in your head, whether or not you could actually verify it or not, nobody cared. Like, all that went out the window. And so now we're in this very weird place where this is considered normal now. And that's not normal. Like, that's not okay. And that goes a long way to where we are at with journalism right now and people's opinion on it. Because it's like, if you are constantly having to correct stories, and when I say you, I mean I mean the Twitter fact-checking brigade, when it's like, whenever a story drops now, and this is one of the good things about social media, this is one of the things that I do genuinely like about Twitter. If a story drops now and it is incorrect, either factually incorrect or just any kind of incorrect, you're going to know immediately because somebody's going to be on your ass within an hour. Like, it's not something that takes days or weeks or months or even years to debunk a story anymore. It's hours. It's like that. It's like you drop something and it ain't correct, everybody on Twitter is going to jump on your ass like white on rice. And that, I do think, is a good thing, because this is really the only thing holding journalism accountable at this point. It's Twitter. It's us. Which is a little scary, because we're just a bunch of schmoes on Twitter. Like, what the hell happened to all the editors? What the fuck? When did Twitter become the fact checkers? Like, what? This is not normal. This is not okay, but this is where we're at. And so, it's just, this has done so much damage to the craft of journalism. And I know that sounds like an asshole thing to say, but there are still some of us who do care about journalism and about ethics and about journalists and outlets caring about actually getting their stories correct before running them, even if that means that you're not first to press. At least you're fucking right. And that should be more important than being first. But now being first is more important. And like I said, it's not something that started with Russiagate, but this just accelerated it. And it's crept over into other areas and other stories. And it's just something that I don't know how you roll that back. But another thing that our wonderful journalist class has been doing over the past couple of days is trying to pretend like the last 2 years kind of didn't happen, where there is this idea that we did nothing wrong. Like, we just followed the story and reported the facts. No, you didn't. Like, even Jeff Zucker's dumbass, who is the head of CNN, went out in public and just said, we're just journalists, we're not investigators. Bish, you have a whole investigative journalist department at CNN. That is your fucking job. It is not your job to just repeat whatever some schmo told you to fucking repeat. Like, the admission that all you did was just repeat whatever the hell somebody told you to repeat uncritically, did not give it any thought, did not investigate anything, just whatever the hell somebody told you, and you thought it sounded good, you fucking went with it. Really, dude? Really? And you expect anybody to take you seriously at this point? It's just like, I don't. It's so wild, and like, there's no introspection here. And I would think that even if there was a tiny bit of introspection in journalism right now, they would be pissed. Because basically, you've been lied to for the past 2 years. Like, people have been feeding you this, that, or the other, stories that were just straight up false, and you're not mad? Like, I would be livid, because that's your name on that piece. That's your organization's name on that. Your anonymous source, who the fuck knows who they are? You know, I'm never going to know. Nobody else is ever going to know. They're just off scot-free, and you're the one that has to deal with the fallout. Like, I don't understand why they're not angry. I would be angry. But it's just like this, there's no introspection. No sitting down to think about where did we screw up. And at least after Covington, as bad as the press got that, there was at least a little bit of introspection after that and thinking that, you know what? Maybe we did screw up. Maybe we do need to do better. This right now, which is way larger magnitude than Covington, there's nothing. There's either just pretending like it didn't happen, or acting like you did nothing wrong and that what you did was absolutely correct and 100% fine, and that there's no reckoning here, there's no atonement, there's nothing to discuss. Really? Okay, guys. But the last thing that I want to talk about before we leave off of the media, who very, very much rightly deserve all of the criticism that they're getting right now, and Tybee actually touched on this in his piece, is this idea that there were journalists, apparently, who were skeptical of Russiagate and who did have questions, but kind of kept their heads down because they didn't want to face the personal or professional consequences that come of it, which, to segue from that into this, which is that there is now this new line coming about from the mainstream media that, you know, hashtag not all journalists. That's not a real hashtag. I made it up. But this idea that, oh, we didn't all go all in on Russiagate. It wasn't all of us. Some of us were skeptical. And I'm like, you know what? Hold the fuck up for a second. Because there were journalists who were skeptical of Russiagate and who did publicly air their skepticism and their questions. Guys like Glenn Greenwald, guys like Michael Tracy, guys like, I mean, there are a couple of them out there who did and faced consequences like you wouldn't believe for doing so. Every single time one of those journalists said anything critical about Russiagate or had a question, all of a sudden it's a fucking dog pile. Like, all of a sudden, oh, you're a Trump supporter. Oh, you love Russia. You're a Putin puppet. You're a Russian bot. You're somehow paid off. Like all this shit, like just piled on every single time. And so, yeah, there were journalists that questioned it. Yeah, they paid a price for that. Because whenever you deviate from the current narrative, whatever the narrative happens to be, you get shit on. So no, you don't get to claim some kind of mantle if you weren't out there doing it for the past 2 years, publicly. Now this whole, oh, well, I was skeptical, but I didn't say anything. Well, guess what? Now that it's okay for you to say something, now you want to say something. Where the fuck were you for the past 2 years? Where were you when you could have actually said something and maybe made a difference, even though it would have cost you something personally and professionally? You know, it's just like, it's chicken shit stuff like that. It's like, all of a sudden, oh, now that it's safe to say something, you want to say something. Okay. But possibly the worst thing about all this, media-wise, is that over the past 2 years, all of this was excused. All of this behavior was excused. All of the shoddy journalism, all of the thinly sourced stories, all of the anonymous shit, all of the wrong stories, everything was excused under the idea that they would be vindicated when the Mueller report came out. Well, guess what? You weren't. So now, instead of having this kind of glow put over the past 2 years where everybody forgets all the mistakes and everybody forgets all of the wrong stories and all of the fuck-ups and all of the retractions and all the corrections because ultimately you were right and this vindicates you. It's like they never for a second thought that we would be here. They never entertained the notion of what if this report comes back and it says that we're not charging Trump with anything. Never for a second did that thought enter their mind at any point in the past 2 years that maybe, just maybe, you might have to actually answer for all of the screw-ups that you have made. And that now, instead of everything just being kind of smoothed over and whitewashed because ultimately we were on the right side of history, now every mistake is in glaring relief and you don't want to deal with it. You know, it's, you gambled, you lost. And now you don't want to deal with the loss. It's like, and this is where the reckoning comes in. There's nothing that anybody else can do outside of us personally, each as individuals, holding the media accountable for the past 2 years. There's not going to be any kind of congressional hearing. There's not going to be any kind of censure. There's not going to be any kind of anything like that. It's going to be us looking at them and saying, you know what? No. Now you showed your asses, and now we see what you are. So that's the only reckoning that is going to happen. It's not going to come internally from the media because it's obvious that they have no interest in actually sitting down and evaluating the past 2 years. It's going to come from people like you and me and everybody else on Twitter and other social media and podcasts and YouTube videos and who else ever does these kind of critiques to point out that you fucked up royally over the past 2 years. And you should probably look inside yourselves and try to figure out how not to do that again. But moving on from the media, because this is not where I want to end this. There's still some more stuff I want to say. And that is this idea that I've seen this question floated on Twitter, and I do think some people have asked it in a trolling way, but I do think some people have asked it straight. So I want to address it, and that is this idea of, well, why isn't everybody happy? Shouldn't everybody be happy that the president has been found not guilty? Well, not guilty. I will say that loosely. This was in a court of law, so it's not like not guilty, but that he was found that he had not colluded with the Russians. Why isn't everybody happy? Well, allow me to explain. The whole point of this investigation, and for everybody who was calling for this investigation to happen in the first place, it was not to exonerate Trump of collusion. It was to prove that he had colluded. Just like every other investigation that takes place in criminal, civil, against anybody here in the United States, when you have a charge levied against you, the point of the investigation is to prove that you did it, not to prove that you didn't do it. And especially with this particular investigation and this particular charge, the whole reason people wanted the special counsel investigation was to prove that Donald Trump colluded with Russia, or to prove that he engaged in obstruction of justice. So if that was your mindset going into it, then of course you're pissed that you didn't get what you wanted. It was never the point to say that he didn't do it. The point was to say that he did. And so, yeah, of course they're not happy. They didn't get the result they wanted. It was never about this being like a healthy thing where you exonerate the president of obstruction or of colluding with the Russian government. That was never the point of this. Never once. So, no, people aren't happy. They didn't get what they wanted. They didn't get what they thought was going to be the end game here. Which, to bring this to a conclusion, and this is kind of my last thoughts on this, is that was there ever anybody, honestly, who was serious about genuinely adjudicating this, as opposed to making it some kind of tribal partisan thing where my side versus your side, and we're gonna get him, we're gonna get Trump, we're gonna get him out of office, we're gonna get him impeached, we're gonna find the crime thing that he did so that we can get him to do the things and go away, and look at all these other people that got hemmed up. And it's like, well, that was never the point. The point was to figure out whether or not Donald Trump conspired with Russia to influence the 2016 election. That was the point of the special counsel investigation. So was anybody genuinely ever interested in just finding out that information, and then once finding it out being like, either, hey, cool, or, well, this sucks, now we gotta do impeachment hearings? And my answer is, at this point, no. Or at least very, very few of us. I won't say that there were none of us. I was certainly one of the people who was wanting to have a genuine answer to this question, because, again, this is serious business. This isn't a game. Like, calling a special counsel investigation on a sitting president isn't a fucking joke. It's not a game. It's serious business. And it's like, at no point did anybody take this seriously outside of Robert Mueller and his office, which, to his credit and to his office's credit, did take this rather seriously. Like, they did it clean. There was no leaks, nothing like that. The only time that his office spoke publicly on the matter at all is to address the BuzzFeed story that, oddly enough, it's interesting that this is kind of bookended by BuzzFeed stories. First it started with the Steele dossier, and then kind of ended with the story that Mueller's office had proof that Trump instructed Cohen to lie to Congress, which obviously was, again, incorrect, was fucking wrong. But the only time that Mueller's office even publicly addressed anything was to dispute that particular article. And that's it. That's the only public statement that they made up until their report will be released in the future. So, anyway, this kind of goes back to my thoughts on the cynicism of the day and how people have basically just made this into a tribal thing where, like I said, this was serious business. Like, it's not a small thing to do this to a sitting president. No matter how you may happen to think about the sitting president, he's the president, and calling a special counsel to investigate him is not something that you just do flippantly, or you just do to get revenge on somebody, or because you don't like them, or because you don't like the results of an election. And it's like, nobody takes this shit seriously anymore. And that's a little scary. That's a little frightening going forward, because I don't know what's going to happen to the next president. and the president after that, and the president after that, because these sorts of ideas of this being a serious thing are starting to erode in a way that I don't think is healthy, and I don't think is very good, because once you start lowering this bar for how low the bar can go before you start to go here, that's not good. That's not really a great way to run a country. And however you may happen to feel about government, having it be in perpetual chaos because somebody is mad at somebody else, so you want to start this investigation or whatever it is that you want to do. You want to start impeachment proceedings. You want to do special counsel. You want to do this, that, whatever. That's not a great way to run a country. It doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence, and it scares the shit out of a lot of people. So maybe we can start to maybe dial this back a little bit and start to understand the seriousness of allegations before you make them, and the seriousness of starting certain procedures before starting them. Just a thought, but on that note, I'm going to go ahead and leave off on this because I think I've pretty much finished up everything I wanted to say about this investigation, at least for now, until the Mueller report is released, which, like I said, will be happening sooner rather than later, so I'm sure I will be revisiting this, but at least for right now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So, as usual, if you did make it this far, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.